My son and his wife invited me to visit them in Los Angeles. No one was home. Their neighbor ran up to me and started shouting, "Run away before it is too late, these are terrible people." I replied, "What did they do?" He revealed the shocking truth to me. "Before I dive into this nightmare, tell me in the comments if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a complete stranger. Hit like and subscribe if you believe truth always comes to light." I stood in front of the massive wrought iron gates of a $4 million estate in Bel Air. The California sun was not just hot, it was aggressive. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on the shoulders of my navy blue suit. I checked my watch for the 10th time. It was 2 in the afternoon, and the temperature was hovering near 100 degrees. Sweat was already trickling down my back, making my shirt stick to my skin in the most uncomfortable way possible. I pressed the intercom button again. Silence. Just the static buzz of the cicadas in the perfectly manicured hedges. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed Brandon. It went straight to voicemail just like the last 3 times. "Hey Dad, can't wait to see you, just grab an Uber to the house and we will meet you there." That was the last text I had received from him 6 hours ago when I landed at LAX. I wiped my forehead with a handkerchief that was rapidly losing its battle against the humidity. I looked up at the house. It was a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa with terracotta roof tiles and white stucco walls that gleamed blindingly in the sunlight. It was the kind of house you see in magazines, the kind of house that screams success. My son, the CEO of a tech startup, lived here, or at least that is what he told me. But as I stood there, my engineer brain started to pick up on things that did not quite fit the narrative. I spent 40 years analyzing structures for weakness, and my eyes are trained to find the cracks in the facade. The first thing I noticed was the grass. The lawn directly in front of the gate was brown and patchy. In a neighborhood where homeowners associations fined you for leaving a trash can out too long, dead grass was a red flag. It meant no gardener. What kind of multi-millionaire does not have a gardener? I looked closer at the gate itself. Rust. Small orange streaks running down from the hinges. It was subtle, but it was there. This was not the patina of age. It was the sign of neglect. Then I saw the mailbox. It was a sleek, modern, brushed metal box built into the stone pillar, but sticking out of the slot was a flyer. I stepped closer and squinted against the glare. It was a coupon for a 2-for-1 pizza deal from a chain place down on Sunset Boulevard. I frowned. People who live in $4 million homes do not get flyers for discount pepperoni pizzas stuffed in their gates. They have staff who filter the mail, or they live in communities so gated that solicitors cannot even get to the driveway. Something was wrong. The silence of the house felt heavy, almost hostile. It did not feel like a home waiting for a guest. It felt like a fortress that had been abandoned. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. My water bottle was empty, and I was starting to feel lightheaded. I was 67 years old, and while I kept myself in shape, standing in triple-digit heat with a 40-pound suitcase was pushing my limits. I decided to try the intercom one more time, leaning my weight against the stone pillar. I pressed the button and held it down, hoping the annoying buzz would wake someone up inside. Maybe they were in the pool. Maybe the music was too loud. I refused to let my mind go to the darker places. I refused to think that maybe I had flown halfway across the country for a lie. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the heavy afternoon air. It was the sound of a high-pressure hose engaging. I turned around just in time to see a stream of water hit the asphalt inches from my polished dress shoes. I jumped back, nearly tripping over my suitcase. "Hey, get away from there!" a voice bellowed. I looked across the street. An older man was marching down his driveway. He looked to be about 75 with a military buzz cut and a posture that looked like it had been forged in the Marine Corps. He was holding a garden hose like a rifle, pointing the nozzle directly at me. I held up my hands, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Excuse me, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite my racing heart. I am just waiting for my son." The man stopped at the edge of his property, his eyes narrowed into slits. He looked me up and down, analyzing me with a suspicion that made my skin crawl in. He did not look like a crazy person. He looked like a man who was tired of dealing with nonsense. "Your son," he spat the words out like they were poison. "Let me guess. He is a big-shot tech CEO. Or maybe a producer. Or wait, is he a venture capitalist this week?" I froze. How did he know that? "Yes," I said, straightening my back. "My name is Gerald Sullivan. My son is Brandon Sullivan. He lives here." The man let out a harsh, barking laugh that had zero humor in it. He turned the hose off but kept his grip tight on the nozzle. "Sullivan," he muttered, shaking his head. "Last week it was Miller. The week before that it was Jones. You are the third father this month, pal. And let me tell you, you all have the same lost look in your eyes." My stomach dropped. The heat suddenly felt 10 times more oppressive. "What are you talking about?" I asked, stepping off the curb and moving toward him. "This is my son's house. He sent me the address. He sent me photos." The neighbor took a step forward, his face hardening. "Look, I do not know what kind of scam they are running over there, but that house has been a revolving door of drama for 6 months. I have seen weeping mothers, angry girlfriends, and process servers banging on that gate. And now you look like a decent man. Do yourself a favor. Get in a cab, go back to the airport, and fly home. These people are vampires. They will suck you dry and leave you on the curb." I felt a flash of anger. This stranger was insulting my family. "I do not know who you are," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "but you are talking about my son. Brandon is a good man. He is successful. He invited me here." The neighbor scoffed. "Invited you? Did he ask for money yet? Or is he waiting until after dinner?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, unable to respond immediately. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The neighbor saw my hesitation and nodded grimly. "Yeah, that is what I thought. Run, Gerald. Run while you still have your wallet." Before I could demand an explanation, the screech of tires tore through the quiet neighborhood. A black Porsche Cayenne swerved around the corner, taking the turn way too fast. It roared up the street and slammed on the brakes right in front of the gate. My heart leaped. It was Brandon. The window rolled down and I saw my son. He looked exactly like the photo's handsome, sharp jawline, expensive sunglasses. But there was something off. He was sweating, profusely, and his knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. Dad Brandon yelled, his voice tight. "Get in! Hurry!" The gate started to open slowly, creaking loudly as the rusted hinges protested. The neighbor Dominic shook his head and spat on the ground. "Do not say I did not warn you," he muttered, turning his back on me and walking back up his driveway. I looked from the angry neighbor to my frantic son. The logic in my head was screaming that something was wrong, but the father in my heart just wanted to hug his boy. I grabbed my suitcase and hurried toward the car. The passenger door flew open and a woman leaned out. It was Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. I had only met her once briefly at the wedding 2 years ago. She was stunning with long blonde hair and the kind of makeup that looks natural but takes hours to apply. But right now, her smile looked like it was painted on a cracking porcelain mask. "Hi, Gerald. So sorry we are late," she said, her voice high and breathless. "Just throw the bag in the back and jump in. We have to get inside. The sensors on the gate are acting up." I tossed my suitcase into the back seat and climbed in. The interior of the car smelled of expensive leather and stale coffee. The air conditioning was blasting at full power, freezing the sweat on my skin. As soon as I closed the door, Brandon gunned the engine and shot through the opening gate before it was even fully open. He drove up the long driveway and parked in front of the massive double doors. He let out a long breath, slumping back in his seat. Who was that old guy yelling at you? Brandon asked, watching the rearview mirror as the gates closed behind us. I watched his eyes. He was checking the mirror not to see if the gate was closed, but to see if the neighbor was watching. He is a lunatic, Vanessa interjected before I could answer. Total psycho. He has severe dementia. He thinks everyone who visits us is a government spy or a debt collector. We have tried to file complaints, but the city does nothing because he is a veteran. Dementia. It was a plausible explanation. It explained the aggression, the confusion about the names, the paranoia. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Oh, I see, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. That must be difficult for you guys living next to that. Brandon laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. You have no idea, Dad. Come on, let's get you inside. It is roasting out here. We got out of the car. Brandon hugged me, but the embrace felt stiff. He patted my back a little too hard, like he was trying to convince himself that everything was normal. He was wearing a designer linen suit, but I noticed a stain on the cuff of his shirt. Coffee or maybe wine. He looked tired. His eyes had dark circles under them that the sunglasses had hidden. Vanessa took my arm, her nails digging slightly into my bicep. Welcome home, Dad, she said. Brandon unlocked the front door and pushed it open. I stepped into the foyer, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It did not smell like a home. It did not smell like cooking or laundry or perfume. It smelled like lemon industrial cleaner and stagnant air. The foyer was magnificent, with a dual staircase and a crystal chandelier that must have cost more than my first house. But it was silent. Dead silent. I walked into the living room. The furniture was all white, pristine, not a wrinkle on the cushions. I looked at the coffee table. There were 3 large art books stacked perfectly in the center. I recognized them. They were the kind of books interior designers buy by the yard to fill space. I looked at the walls. Abstract art. Blue swirls, gray squares. Generic. Safe. Where are the photos? I asked. Brandon stopped halfway to the kitchen. What do you mean? He asked, turning around slowly. The photos, I repeated. Of the wedding. Of your trip to Italy. Of Mom. I scanned the mantel above the fireplace. Empty. Just a vase with dried white branches in it. I looked at the shelves. No knickknacks, no souvenirs, no personal clutter. Oh, Vanessa said quickly, walking past me to the kitchen. We are redecorating. The designer said we needed to declutter to create a more zen vibe. We have all the personal stuff in storage for now. We wanted the house to feel open and modern for your visit. I nodded, but the engineer in me was screaming again. You declutter to sell a house, not to live in it. And you certainly do not put pictures of your dead mother in storage to create a zen vibe. I walked over to the bookshelf and ran my finger along the shelf. Dust. A thick layer of dust. If they had a cleaner who used industrial lemon scent, why was there dust on the shelves? Brandon came back with a glass of water. His hand was trembling slightly. Here you go, Dad. Drink up. We have a reservation for dinner at 7. The best steakhouse in the city. My treat. He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. His eyes were darting around the room, checking the windows, checking the door. He looked like a man who was waiting for the police to kick the door down. I took the water. It was lukewarm. Thanks, son, I said. I looked at Vanessa. She was standing by the window, peeking through the blinds at the street. She was not looking at the view. She was watching the neighbor's house, or maybe the road. I took a sip of water and looked around this $4 million tomb. My son lied about the neighbor. I was sure of it now. Dominic did not have dementia. He had clarity. And that scared me more than anything. Because if the neighbor was telling the truth, then I was not a guest. I was a target. And looking at the expensive watch on my son's wrist and the desperation in his eyes, I realized that the danger is not outside the gate. It was standing right here in the living room wearing a linen suit and calling me Dad. I decided to test the waters, just a small stress test like I would do on a bridge beam. "So Brandon," I said, setting the glass down on the coasterless table, "how is the business? I saw your company was mentioned in that tech blog last month." I made that up. There was no mention. I wanted to see his reaction. Brandon froze for a microsecond, just a tiny glitch in his composure. "Oh yeah," he said, recovering quickly. "It is going great. We are actually closing a massive Series B funding round next week. That is actually one of the reasons I wanted you to come out. I have some big news." He took the bait. A lie to cover a lie. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I was right. I smiled at him, a practiced, calm smile that I used to wear during chaotic board meetings. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "I cannot wait to hear all about it." I was lying too. I did not want to hear about it. I wanted to grab my suitcase and run. But I couldn't. This was my son. And whatever mess he was in, I was now in it with him. I just didn't realize that the mess wasn't just financial. It was criminal. And I was the designated victim. The restaurant Brandon chose was called the Obsidian Room. It was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, and the lighting was so dim you needed the flashlight on your phone to see your fork. We were seated at a prime table near the window overlooking the glittering skyline of Los Angeles. As we sat down, the maitre d' pulled out Vanessa's chair with a flourish that seemed practiced to the point of exhaustion. Brandon ordered a bottle of Cabernet without even looking at the wine list. I caught a glimpse of the sommelier's raised eyebrow. That bottle cost $600. I knew it, and by the look on the waiter's face, he knew my son probably could not afford it. For the next hour, I was forced to watch a performance that was as painful as it was elaborate. Brandon did not eat. He just talked. He talked with his hands, waving his fork around like a conductor leading an orchestra of lies. He told me about his company supposedly called Ether Dynamics. He used every buzzword in the dictionary. He spoke of synergy, blockchain integration, and AI-driven paradigm shifts. He claimed they were disrupting the logistics industry. He said they had Google running scared. I sat there cutting my steak, listening not as a father, but as a structural engineer. In my line of work, if your calculations are off by a fraction of an inch, the bridge collapses. If your foundation is weak, the skyscraper falls. I listened to Brandon's pitch, and I looked for the pillars. There were none. He was describing a penthouse without a building underneath it. He talked about revenue streams, but never mentioned profit margins. He talked about user acquisition, but stumbled when I asked about retention rates. When I asked him a simple technical question about his server infrastructure, he waved it off, saying he had people for that. He did not have people. A CEO who does not know his own product is not a CEO, he is a mascot. Vanessa played her part perfectly. Every time Brandon paused for breath, she would touch his arm and look at me with wide, admiring eyes. She would say things like, "Oh, Gerald, you should see him in meetings, he is a shark." Or she would mention how they were thinking of buying a vacation home in Aspen because the tax implications of their profits were getting too complicated. It was a duet of delusion. They were feeding off each other, building a castle of clouds right there on the white tablecloth. But I noticed the details they tried to hide. I noticed that Vanessa's designer handbag had a small scuff on the corner that had been colored in with a Sharpie marker. I noticed that Brandon's suit, while expensive, was slightly tight around the shoulders, as if he had bought it years ago or borrowed it from someone smaller. Then came the moment of truth. The check. The waiter placed the small leather folder on the table with the discretion of an undertaker. The bill was $840. For 3 people. I reached for my wallet out of habit, but Brandon stopped me with a loud, performative laugh. "Put that away, Dad. You are in my city now. This is on the company." He pulled out a sleek black credit card. It was metal. It made a heavy clack sound as he tossed it onto the table. He looked around the room, making sure the neighboring tables saw the gesture. He was not paying for dinner. He was paying for an audience. The waiter took the card and vanished into the shadows. Brandon leaned back, sipping the last of the wine, looking like the king of the world. "So, Dad," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "about that investment opportunity I mentioned. We have a 48-hour window before the IPO closes. I wanted to give you first refusal before I let the venture capital guys in." He was closing the deal. The dinner, the wine, the talk, it was all just foreplay for this moment. He was trying to pick my pocket while smiling in my face. Before I could answer, the waiter returned. He was not walking with the same smooth glide as before. He walked briskly, his face set in a mask of professional annoyance. He stopped at our table and leaned down, speaking low enough so others wouldn't hear, but loud enough that the shame was palpable. "I am sorry, sir," the waiter said, sliding the black card back toward Brandon. The card was declined. The silence at the table was instant and absolute. Brandon's smile froze. It did not fade, it just turned into a rictus of panic. "That is impossible," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Run it again. It is a platinum account. There is no limit." "I have run it 3 times, sir," the waiter said, his voice dropping deeper into a monotone. "The bank has put a hold on it. Do you have another form of payment?" Brandon laughed again, but this time it sounded like a bark. "This is ridiculous. I just transferred 50 grand into that account this morning." He pulled out his phone, tapping furiously on the screen. Vanessa jumped in her hand, flying to her chest in a gesture of shocked innocence that would not have fooled a blind man. "Oh my God, honey," she said, her voice trembling. "It must be the fraud protection. Remember, we made that huge deposit for the yacht rental yesterday. They probably froze it for security." It was a clumsy lie. Banks do not freeze cards because you have too much money. They freeze cards because you have none. Brandon was sweating now. Visible beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead, gleaming in the candlelight. He opened his wallet again. He started digging. And that was when I saw it. From where I was sitting, I had a clear view into the open fold of his wallet. It was a graveyard. I saw a gas station rewards card. I saw a gym membership card that looked bent. I saw 2 other credit cards, but he flipped past them quickly, and I saw why. One had the corner cut off. The other was an old student ID. There was no cash. Not a single green bill. The leather slot where money should be was empty, revealing the fraying fabric lining. He did not have another card. He did not have $20. He was sitting in a restaurant that charged $50 for a salad, and he was completely, utterly destitute. The panic in his eyes shifted from social embarrassment to primal fear. He knew that in about 30 seconds, the manager was going to come over, and the charade would be over. The police would be called. Theft of services. It would be a public execution of his ego. I watched him struggle for another few seconds. I watched him tap his phone, pretending to call the bank, holding the screen to his ear, even though I could see it was still on the home screen. I watched Vanessa bite her lip so hard I thought it would bleed her eyes, darting toward the exit like a trapped animal. "Enough," I said. I did not shout. I said it with the flat, heavy tone of a judge delivering a sentence. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. It was a brown leather square I had bought at a department store 10 years ago. It was not sleek. It was not metal. But inside it was a debit card linked to 40 years of hard work, savings, and compound interest. I pulled out my card and handed it to the waiter. "Put it on this," I said, "and add 20% for your trouble." "No." "Dad, you can't." Brandon protested, but his hand went limp. He dropped his phone onto the table. "It is just a glitch. I can fix this." "Sit down, Brandon," I said. The waiter took my card and walked away. The relief on my son's face was instantaneous, followed immediately by a wave of resentment. He hated me in that moment. He hated me because I had saved him, and by saving him, I had proven that he was a failure. Vanessa let out a long, shaky breath and reached for her wine glass, draining it in one gulp. "Thank you, Gerald," she whispered. "We will wire you the money first thing tomorrow. It is just so embarrassing. The bank systems are so unreliable these days." I did not answer her. I looked at Brandon. He was staring at the tablecloth, unable to meet my eyes. He closed his wallet and slid it into his pocket, hiding the emptiness away. But we both knew what was in there. Nothing. Just like his company. Just like his life. The dinner was over. The wine was finished. And for the first time since I arrived, the air between us was honest. It was the cold, bitter air of reality. I knew now that they didn't just want my help. They needed my lifeblood to survive another week. And as I looked at my son, I realized he would say or do absolutely anything to keep that empty wallet hidden from the world. The drive back to the house was silent. Not the comfortable silence of family, but the suffocating silence of a courtroom before the verdict is read. Brandon gripped the steering wheel so hard I could hear the leather creak. Vanessa stared out the window, her reflection in the glass, looking hard and calculating. When we pulled into the driveway of the rented mansion, the facade of the happy reunion finally crumbled completely. There were no more smiles, no more offers of water or tea. As soon as the front door closed behind us, Brandon turned to me. The desperation that had been bubbling under the surface at the restaurant now boiled over. "Dad, we need to talk business," he said, his voice tight. He did not suggest we sit down. He did not ask if I was tired from the flight. He walked straight to a sleek, modern sideboard and pulled out a thick binder. It had a glossy black cover with the words Ether Dynamics printed in silver foil. He slammed it onto the glass coffee table. The sound echoed in the empty, impersonal room. "I need $500,000, Brandon said. He said it fast, like pulling off a Band-Aid. "And I need it by tomorrow morning." I stood there, my suitcase still by the door, looking at my son. He looked manic. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, revealing a neck flushed with stress. $500,000. It was a fortune. It was the kind of money that took a lifetime to save. And he asked for it, as if he were asking to borrow $5 for a sandwich. "What for, Brandon?" I asked, keeping my voice level. I walked over to the coffee table and looked down at the binder. I did not sit. I wanted to keep the high ground. "It is the bridge loan," he said, pacing back and forth on the white rug. "The venture capitalists are ready to sign, but there is a liquidity requirement. I need to show cash reserves to trigger the matching funds. If I do not have the $500,000 in the account by noon tomorrow, the deal falls through. I lose everything. The technology, the patents, the future." I sat down and opened the binder. I am a structural engineer. I spent 40 years looking at blueprints, calculating loads, and finding weak points in steel and concrete. I know what technical documents look like. I know what real data looks like. I flipped through the pages of my son's business plan. It was garbage. It was high-resolution stock photos of server farms and people wearing VR headsets interspersed with graphs that meant absolutely nothing. I stopped at a page titled Proprietary Algorithm Architecture. It showed a flowchart. I adjusted my glasses and looked closer. It was not an algorithm. It was a basic network diagram copied from a textbook. I saw a typo in the word bandwidth. I saw a revenue projection chart that went from 0 to 10 billion in 6 months. It was a fantasy. A child's drawing, pretending to be a blueprint. "Brandon," I said, looking up at him. "This graph shows a linear progression of user acquisition that defies every law of market probability. And this technical schematic on page 10, that is a wiring diagram for a commercial HVAC system. I know because I installed one just like it in a warehouse in 1998. Brandon stopped pacing. His face went pale, then red. "You do not understand the tech, Dad," he snapped. "It is symbolic. It is a representation for the investors. They do not care about the wires. They care about the vision. I care about the wires, I said softly. Because if the wires are wrong, the house burns down. That is when Vanessa stepped in. She had been standing in the shadows of the hallway watching. Now she walked into the light, and her face was terrifying. The mask of the sweet daughter-in-law was gone. In its place was a cold, predatory hunger. "Stop it, Gerald," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You are obsessing over details because you are too cheap to help your own son. You have the money. We know you have it. Brandon told me about your retirement accounts, and we know about the house in Chicago." My blood ran cold. They had been discussing my assets. They had probably been counting my money before I even booked my flight. "What about my house?" I asked, closing the binder. "It is just sitting there," Vanessa said, walking over to stand next to Brandon. She put a hand on his shoulder, not to comfort him, but to steady him like a trainer with a prize fighter. "You are one old man living in a 4-bedroom colonial. It is wasteful. The market in Chicago is peaking right now. We checked the comps on Zillow. Your place is worth at least 600 grand. I looked at them. They were a united front now, the desperate son and the ruthless wife. "So that is the plan," I said. "I sell my home. The home where I raised you, Brandon. The home where your mother died. And I give you the money for this vision." "It is not just giving me money, Dad." Brandon pleaded, his eyes wide and wet. "It is an investment. You sell the house, you move here. We have plenty of room. You can live in the guest wing. We will take care of you. You won't be lonely anymore." I looked around the sterile rented living room. The guest wing he was talking about probably did not exist. If this house was a rental, where would I really go once the money was gone? I would be on the street. "We already printed the power of attorney forms," Vanessa said, pulling a document from her purse. She must have been carrying it all night, waiting for the right moment. "All you have to do is sign. We have a realtor in Chicago ready to list it on Monday. We can do a quick sale to a cash buyer. We can have the money in 2 weeks. Brandon can take a short-term loan to cover the gap until then." She placed the paper on top of the glossy binder. It was a general power of attorney. It would give them total control over my finances, my house, my bank accounts, my life. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not a request for help. This was a robbery. They did not want me here. They wanted my liquidation. They saw me not as a father, but as a walking checkbook that needed to be balanced to zero. "Why?" I asked Brandon, ignoring Vanessa. "Why are you doing this? If you are in trouble, tell me the truth. We can figure something out. But do not lie to me about algorithms and liquidity." Brandon looked at Vanessa. She glared at him, a silent command to stay the course. "I am not lying," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Why do you always doubt me? Why do you always think I am a failure? I am trying to build an empire here, and you are worried about a typo. Just sign the paper, Dad. If you love me, you will sign the paper." Emotional blackmail. The last resort of the weak. He was weaponizing my love for him. He knew I would take a bullet for him, so he was handing me the gun and asking me to pull the trigger on myself. Vanessa leaned in, her perfume overpowering the stale air of the room. "Look, Gerald, let's be realistic. You are 67. Your health isn't what it used to be. Do you really want to shovel snow next winter? Do you really want to die alone in that big, empty house? We are offering you a chance to be with family. Do not be stubborn. Do not be selfish." Selfish. The word hung in the air. I had worked double shifts to pay for Brandon's college. I had driven an old sedan for 15 years so he could have a new car for graduation. I had nursed his mother through 3 years of cancer without hiring a nurse because I wanted to be the one holding her hand. And now I was selfish because I hesitated to hand over the last thing I owned to fund a lie. I looked at the power of attorney form. The font was small, standard legal jargon. But to me, it looked like a death warrant. If I signed this, I ceased to be a person. I became a dependent. I became a burden they would discard as soon as the account balance hit zero. But I could not say no, not yet. If I refused outright, things could get ugly. We were alone in a house that wasn't theirs, in a city where I knew no one. Brandon was unstable. Vanessa was desperate. I needed time. I needed a plan. I needed to be the engineer one last time. I needed to stabilize the structure before I could dismantle it. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes, feigning a fatigue that was only half fake. "You are throwing a lot at me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I am tired, Brandon. The flight, the heat, the dinner. My heart is racing a bit." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but Brandon looked concerned. Or maybe he was just worried his cash cow was about to have a heart attack before the transfer went through. "I need to sleep on it," I said. "I cannot sign legal documents when I am this exhausted. I need a clear head." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "I will look at it in the morning," I promised. "If the business is as good as you say, then the house is a small price to pay, but not tonight." Brandon let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since we left the restaurant. "Okay, Dad. Okay. Morning is fine. The bank doesn't open until 9 anyway." He grabbed the binder and the legal form, holding them to his chest like a shield. Vanessa glared at me, suspicious, but she knew she couldn't force my hand physically. "Not yet." "We will show you to your room," she said, her voice icy. They led me up the grand staircase to a bedroom that was as empty as the rest of the house. A bed, a nightstand, and a lamp. No dresser. No closet hangers. "Sleep tight," Gerald Vanessa said from the doorway. "Think about what we said. Think about family." She closed the door. I waited until I heard their footsteps retreat down the hall. I waited until I heard the door to the master bedroom slam shut. Then I moved. I did not undress. I did not unpack. I went straight to the window and looked out at the street. Across the way, the house of the neighbor Dominic was dark. But I knew he was there. And I knew that tomorrow I would have to cross that street. My son wanted my money. My daughter-in-law wanted my house, but tonight, all I wanted was the truth. And I knew the only place to find it was in the house of the man they called crazy. I lay down on the bed on top of the covers, clutching my wallet to my chest. I did not sleep. I listened to the house settle, and I formulated my plan. The engineer was back on the job, and I was going to bring the whole rotten structure down. The mattress was memory foam, expensive and firm, but it felt like concrete against my back. I lay there, in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, where a smoke detector blinked a rhythmic, mocking red light. Sleep was impossible. My mind was a chaotic blueprint of the last 6 hours. The rusted gate, the angry neighbor, the declined credit card, the fake business plan, and now the demand for my house. I checked the time on my phone. It was 2 a.m. The house was silent, wrapped in that unnatural stillness that only exists in places where no one truly lives. I tossed the blanket aside and sat up. The room was stifling. I needed water. I needed to clear my head. I stood up, my joints popping in the quiet, and walked softly toward the door. I reached for the handle but stopped. Voices. Low, urgent whispers drifting down the hallway from the master suite. I know I should have walked away. I was raised to respect privacy. But tonight, privacy was a luxury I could not afford. I pressed my ear against the cool wood of the doorframe. The house was built for show, not for soundproofing. The walls were thin, probably just drywall over cheap studs. The voices became clearer. It was Vanessa. Her voice was not the sweet, high-pitched tone she used at dinner. It was a low hiss, venomous and sharp. "You are weak, Brandon. You are pathetic. He is your father. Just make him sign the damn paper." I held my breath. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I am trying," Van Branden's voice replied. It sounded thick, maybe he was crying. "But he is asking questions." He noticed the typos in the binder. "He is not stupid." "He doesn't have to be smart," Vanessa snapped. "He just has to be guilty. Play the victim card harder. Tell him you will go to jail. Tell him you will kill yourself. I do not care what you say, just get that signature." I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. They were not discussing a business deal. They were scripting a tragedy. "We are out of time," Brandon said, his voice rising in panic. "The host messaged me an hour ago. The booking expires on Thursday. We have 2 days to get him to sign, get the cash advance, and clear out before the cleaners come. If we are still here on Friday, they will call the cops for trespassing." The host. The booking. The words hit me like a physical blow. This was not a rental they were living in. This was a short-term vacation rental, an Airbnb. They had rented a mansion for 3 days just to stage this elaborate con. The photos, the furniture, the empty shelves. It all made sense. They were squatting in a luxury set piece performing a play called The Successful Son. But it got worse. "Forget the host," Vanessa hissed. "Worry about the others." "I got a text from Vinny tonight. He said the interest has compounded again. We owe 40 grand just in VIG. If we do not have a lump sum for them by the weekend, they are going to stop sending texts and start sending guys with baseball bats. And they know about the RV, Brandon. They know where we park." I leaned back against the wall, my legs trembling. Loan sharks. My son had borrowed money from criminals to fund a lifestyle he could not afford, and now the bill was due. And I was the payment plan. They were not asking for $500,000 to build a company. They needed it to buy their lives back. I heard the sound of glass shattering. Brandon must have thrown something. "I cannot do it," he sobbed. "I cannot look him in the eye and rob him. He is the only one who ever believed in me." "He does not believe in you," Vanessa spat back. "He pities you. Look at him. He sits there with his pension and his paid-off house judging us. He owes us this. He owes us a start. Stop crying and be a man. Tomorrow morning you wake him up with coffee. You cry, you beg. You get that signature. Or so help me God, I will leave you to deal with Vinny alone." Silence followed. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then the sound of a door slamming shut within their room. I retreated to my bed, moving like a ghost. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I looked at my hands. These hands had built bridges. They had fixed cars. They had held Brandon when he was a baby and promised to keep him safe. Now they were the target of his desperation. The realization washed over me cold and absolute. My son was gone. The boy I raised was buried under layers of greed, fear, and the toxic influence of a woman who saw people as assets to be liquidated. They were not just lying to me. They were hunting me. They had brought me into a war zone unarmed, hoping I would step on a landmine so they could collect the insurance. I lay back down, but I did not close my eyes. I stared at the red blinking light of the smoke detector. It looked like a warning eye. Danger. 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 I thought about the neighbor Dominic, the crazy man with the hose. He knew. He had seen the rotation of victims. He had tried to warn me, and I had dismissed him because I wanted to believe the lie. I wanted to believe my son was a king, not a beggar thief. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. The sadness in my chest began to harden. It cooled and solidified into something else, something useful. Anger. Not the hot, explosive anger of a tantrum, but the cold, calculated anger of an engineer who realizes the structure is rotten and needs to be demolished. I would not sleep tonight. I would plan. I would wait for the sun to come up. And when it did, I would not be the victim they expected. I would be the disaster they never saw coming. I was going to cross the street. I was going to find the truth. And then I was going to teach my son a lesson that money could not buy. I closed my eyes for a second, visualizing the power of attorney form on the table downstairs. It was not a contract. It was a declaration of war. And I had just decided to fight back. The sun had not yet risen over Bel Air when I opened my eyes. It was 5 a.m. The house was dead silent, wrapped in the heavy, expensive stillness of the early dawn. I had not slept more than an hour, my mind racing, in loops of denial and anger. But now in the gray light, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a man who knows exactly what he has to do. I got out of bed, careful not to make the mattress creak. I did not shower. I did not shave. I pulled on yesterday's clothes, grabbed my wallet and phone, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway stretched out before me like a tunnel. I walked past the master suite where Brandon and Vanessa were sleeping. I could hear the faint hum of a white noise machine coming from inside. It was ironic. They needed a machine to help them sleep, while their conscience apparently gave them no trouble at all. I moved down the grand staircase, skipping the step that I had noticed squeaked the day before. I was not a guest anymore. I was an infiltrator. I slipped out the front door, closing it softly until the latch clicked with a sound no louder than a whisper. The morning air was cool and smelled of jasmine and dew, a sharp contrast to the stale, recycled air inside the rental. I walked down the driveway, my shoes crunching softly on the gravel. The gate was still closed, but I found the manual release lever behind a bush, just where a structural engineer would expect it to be. I slipped through the gap and stepped onto the street. I looked across the road. Dominic's house was a fortress. It was not a modern glass box like the one my son was renting. It was a sturdy brick structure with bars on the windows and a fence that looked like it could stop a tank. A light was already on in the front window. He was awake. I walked up his driveway, feeling exposed like a soldier crossing no man's land. I didn't even have to knock. As I reached the porch, the heavy oak door swung open. Dominic stood there wearing a faded bathrobe over a t-shirt and holding a mug of coffee that steamed in the cool air. He did not smile. He did not look surprised. He just stepped aside and nodded toward the interior of the house. "You took long enough, Sullivan," he grunted. "I have been watching you on the monitor for 10 minutes. I stepped inside. Dominic's house was the opposite of the Airbnb. It was cluttered, lived in, and unapologetically real. There were stacks of newspapers on the floor, photos of grandkids on the mantel, and the smell of bacon grease and old tobacco. It smelled like a home. He led me into a small room off the kitchen that looked like the command center of a battleship. One entire wall was covered in monitors. There were at least 8 screens showing different angles of the street, his backyard, and the front of the house across the way. The house where my son was sleeping. Dominic pointed to a worn leather chair. "Sit," he commanded. He poured a second cup of black coffee from a thermos and shoved it into my hand. It was strong enough to wake the dead. "I told you they were bad news," Dominic said, sitting down in front of the control panel. "But you needed to see it for yourself. Fathers are always the last to know. I was the same way with my youngest. Blind loyalty is a hell of a drug." He tapped a few keys on a keyboard. One of the monitors flickered and changed to a playback screen. The timestamp on the video showed it was from 3 days ago. "Watch closely," Dominic said. On the screen, I saw the black Porsche pull up to the curb, but instead of parking in the driveway, it stopped halfway down the block. Brandon and Vanessa got out. They were not wearing the designer clothes I had seen them in. Brandon was wearing a stained hoodie and sweatpants. Vanessa was wearing flip-flops and ripped jeans. They looked exhausted. They walked around to the back of the Porsche and opened the trunk. They pulled out large plastic bags. Then the camera angle switched. They walked down an alleyway behind the row of mansions. Parked there, tucked behind a dumpster and disguised under a tarp, was an RV. It was an old beat-up recreational vehicle with a cracked windshield and rust along the wheel wells. I watched as my son, the supposed tech CEO, unlocked the door of this rolling wreck and tossed the bags inside. "That is their real home," Dominic said, his voice flat. "They have been living in that thing for 3 months. They park it in different alleys to avoid the police. They only rent the big house when they have a pigeon to pluck. Like you." I stared at the screen, my heart breaking for the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. He was homeless. He was living like a fugitive. But the pity did not last long. Dominic fast-forwarded the video. "This is from 2 nights ago," he said. "This is the part that will send you to prison if you are not careful." The video showed Brandon walking down the street at 2 in the morning. He was moving fast, staying in the shadows. He stopped at a mailbox 3 houses down from Dominic's. He pulled a long, thin metal tool from his pocket. It looked like a modified wire hanger. He slid it into the mail slot and fished around. After a few seconds, he pulled out a stack of envelopes. He stuffed them into his hoodie pocket and moved to the next house. "He is stealing mail," I whispered, the coffee turning sour in my stomach. "He is stealing identities," Dominic corrected. "Credit card offers, bank statements, tax documents. Anything he can use to open accounts in other people's names. He is not just a failure, Gerald. He is a felon. I have seen him hit every mailbox on this block. That is why I got the high-definition cameras. I was building a file for the FBI. But then you showed up." "Why didn't you turn him in yet?" I asked, looking at the old Marine. Dominic sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Because I saw you get out of the cab yesterday. I saw the way you looked at the house. You looked proud. I have a son too. He is doing 20 years in a federal prison in Nevada. I was the one who turned him in. It broke me. I wanted to give you a chance to handle this before the law does. Once the cuffs go on, you lose him forever. But after what I saw last night, I do not think you have a choice anymore." "What did you see last night?" I asked. Dominic clicked a new file. It was from just a few hours ago, right after everyone had gone to bed. The camera zoomed in on the side window of the rental house, the window of the study. I could see Brandon inside. He was holding a phone to his ear, pacing frantically. Then another car pulled up, a sedan with tinted windows. A man got out. He was huge, wearing a leather jacket. He walked up to the window. Brandon opened it. The man reached in and grabbed Brandon by the throat. I gasped. They talked for a minute. Dominic narrated. Or rather, the big guy talked and your son listened. Then the guy let him go and tapped his watch. "That is a deadline, Gerald. That is the mob. Your son owes money to people who do not file lawsuits. They break legs." The screen went black. I sat in the silence of the command center, the hum of the hard drives, the only sound. The image of my son being choked by a loan shark was burned into my retinas. The image of him stealing mail from innocent neighbors was burned into my soul. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Dominic. His grip was strong, reassuring. "I know what you are feeling," he said softly. "You are wondering where you went wrong. You are wondering if you didn't hug him enough, or if you were too hard on him. Stop it. You raised the boy. You did not raise the man he chose to become. That was his choice. And now he is choosing to drag you down with him." I looked up at Dominic. In his eyes, I saw the same pain I was feeling. The pain of a father who has to cut off a limb to save the body. "I cannot let him do this," I said, my voice steady. "I cannot let him hurt anyone else. And I cannot let him take everything I worked for." "Then you need this," Dominic said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. I copied everything. The RV, the mail theft, the visit from the goon. This is your leverage. This is your shield. If you walk back into that house without this, they will eat you alive. With this, you own them. I took the drive. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it carried the weight of my son's destruction. Thank you, Dominic, I said. I do not know why you are helping me. Dominic shrugged, picking up his coffee mug. Us old guys have to stick together. The world thinks we are obsolete. They think we are easy targets. It is time we reminded them that we were fighting wars before they were even born. Now go. The sun is coming up. The enemy is waking up. And you have a battle to win. I stood up, putting the USB drive safely into my pocket. I shook Dominic's hand. It was a firm, calloused handshake. A handshake of alliance. I walked back out into the morning light. The sun was cresting over the hills now, bathing the street in gold. But the rental house across the street looked darker than ever. It was not a home. It was a trap. And I was about to spring it. I was not the victim anymore. I was the structural engineer, and I had just found the blueprints to their demolition. I crossed the street, not with fear, but with purpose. It was time to make a phone call. It was time to call Kat. I walked to the end of the block, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the house where my son was sleeping. I found a spot under the shade of a massive oak tree where the cellular signal was strong and the air felt slightly less suffocating. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. I was not shaking from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of a man who realizes he has been living in a burning building without knowing it. I found the name I was looking for. Catherine O'Malley. Kat was the daughter of my best friend from engineering school. I had watched her grow up from a scrappy kid with skinned knees into one of the most vicious estate attorneys in Chicago. She was family in the way that actually mattered. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Gerald, her voice cut through the line, sharp and alert. It is 5:15 in the morning in Los Angeles. You are supposed to be on vacation. Why are you calling me on my burner line? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Kat, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it right now. Do not ask me why, just do it. There was a pause, the kind of pause where a professional shifts gears from friend to attorney. Talk to me, she said. I need you to run a full credit check on me, I said. I need you to check everything. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. Look for any activity in the last 48 hours, specifically in California. I heard the sound of a laptop opening and the rapid clatter of typing. Kat did not ask if I was crazy. She knew me too well. She knew I tracked my finances down to the penny. If I was asking for a credit check at dawn, something was catastrophically wrong. Give me 2 minutes, she said. The typing continued, a rhythmic, aggressive sound that echoed in my ear. While she worked, I watched the street. A delivery truck drove by, slowing down as it passed the rental house. The driver looked at the address, checked a clipboard, and kept driving. Even the mailman looked suspicious to me now. Okay, I am in, Kat said. Her voice had changed. It was colder, harder. Gerald, are you sitting down? No, I said. I am standing on a street corner in Bel Air. Just tell me. You have 3 new inquiries, she said. Hard pulls on your credit. All of them from yesterday. My stomach dropped. Hard pulls meant someone was applying for credit, not just checking it. Did they go through? I asked, closing my eyes. The typing stopped. There was a long, heavy silence. Gerald, she said softly. It is not just inquiries. These are approved loans. High-risk personal loans. The kind you get from online lenders who do not ask too many questions as long as the credit score is over 800. Read them to me, I commanded. First one is from Quick Cash Lending, $50,000, approved yesterday at 2 p.m. The funds were dispersed immediately to a checking account at Wells Fargo. Do you have a Wells Fargo account, Gerald? No, I said. I have been with Chase for 30 years. I didn't think so, she said. Second one is from Liberty Finance, $40,000, approved at 4 p.m., also dispersed. And the third one? God, Gerald. The third one is from a peer-to-peer lending site, $60,000. The interest rate on this is predatory. It is 28%. $150,000. In one afternoon, while I was on the plane, while I was sitting in that restaurant paying for his steak. My son had not just asked for money. He had stolen my identity and leveraged my perfect credit history to bury me in debt before I even walked through his door. How did they do it, Kat? I asked. My voice sounded distant, like I was hearing it from underwater. I have two-factor authentication. I have passwords. They have your social security number. Gerald, she explained. You co-signed his student loans 10 years ago, remember? He has the number. And as for the verification, did you get any weird text messages yesterday? Or maybe phone calls that hung up? I thought back. On the plane, my phone had been off. When I landed, I had a dozen notifications. I thought it was just network lag. They probably ported your number or intercepted the codes, Kat continued. Or if they have your physical mail. I looked across the street at Dominic's house. The mail theft. Brandon had been stealing mail to practice. He had probably set up a mail forwarding request in my name weeks ago. The letters from the banks thanking me for my loan applications were probably sitting in that RV right now. This isn't borrowing, Gerald. Kat said, her voice rising in intensity. This is grand larceny. This is identity theft. And it is elder abuse. Who did this? Tell me who did this. I looked at the white stucco mansion glowing in the morning sun. It looked so innocent, so perfect. It was Brandon, I said. Kat did not gasp. She did not say she was sorry. She let out a sharp exhale like she had been expecting this. I knew it, she muttered. I knew that kid was trouble when he started skipping Thanksgiving to go to crypto conferences. Okay, Gerald. Listen to me very carefully. You are in a very dangerous situation. These are not standard loans. These lenders will come after you aggressively. If we do not act right now, you are going to be liable for every cent. What do? I asked. We need to go nuclear, she said. I am going to place a fraud alert on all 3 bureaus immediately. That will stop the bleeding. No more new accounts. But for the ones that are already open, we have to file a police report. You have to go to the LAPD and report your son for fraud. Today. I hesitated. Report my son. Put him in handcuffs. I thought about the little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. I thought about the man who was currently being choked by loan sharks. If I report him, he goes to prison, I said. If you do not report him, you lose everything, Kat countered. Gerald, listen to me. $150,000 is just the beginning. If they have your info, they will drain your retirement accounts next. They will try to mortgage your house in Chicago. The house. Kat. I said, a sudden panic seizing me. They want me to sign a power of attorney. They have the papers printed. They want me to sign it this morning. Silence on the line. Then Kat's voice came back low and terrifying. Gerald, get out of there. Do not sign anything. Do not even pick up a pen. If you sign a general power of attorney, you are giving them legal permission to do everything they have already done illegal. You are ratifying the fraud. If you sign that paper, you are saying, yes, I authorize my son to take my money. You will never get a dime back. The police won't touch it because it will be a civil matter. They will take your house, your savings, and your pension, and they will leave you destitute. I leaned against the tree, feeling the rough bark against my back. The puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. The rush, the pressure, The fake business crisis. They didn't just want the house money for the business. They needed the power of attorney to cover their tracks. They needed to make the theft look legal before the banks caught on. They were going to frame me for my own bankruptcy. "He is not just a thief, Kat," I whispered. "He is trying to erase me. He is a predator, Gerald," she said. "And you are the prey. Now I am freezing your accounts at Chase. I can do that because I am the executor of your estate plan, but you need to get to safety. Do not go back into that house." "I have to," I said. What Kat shouted. "No, you get in a cab and you go to the airport. I will handle the police from here." "I cannot leave yet," I said. "My suitcase is in there. My passport is in there. And I need to look him in the eye. I need to know why." "Gerald, this is not a therapy session. This is a crime scene," she warned. "I know," I said. "But I have a plan. I have evidence. The neighbor gave me videos. I am not going back in there as a victim, Kat. I am going back in as the engineer. I am going to inspect the damage one last time before I condemn the building." Kat was silent for a moment. She knew she couldn't stop me. "Fine," she said. "But keep this line open. Or better yet, record everything. I am sending you a digital affidavit to your email. It is a declaration of fraud. I want you to have it ready on your phone. If they try to force you to sign, you show them that. It is your shield." "Thanks, Kat," I said. "One more thing, Gerald," she added, her voice softening just a fraction. "The Brandon you knew is gone. Do not look for him in that house. You are dealing with a stranger who wears your son's face. Do not show mercy, because he certainly won't show you any." I hung up the phone. The screen was black, reflecting my own face. I looked older than I felt yesterday. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. The fog of confusion was gone. I knew exactly where I stood. I was $150,000 in debt to criminals. My credit was ruined. My retirement was under siege. I looked back at the house. The front door was opening. Brandon stepped out onto the porch, looking around frantically. He was wearing a robe, his hair messy. He was looking for me. He looked worried. A passerby would think he was a concerned son looking for his elderly father. But I knew better. He wasn't looking for his father. He was looking for his scapegoat. I adjusted my jacket. I tightened my grip on my phone. I touched the USB drive in my pocket. I took a step off the curb, crossing the street back toward the lion's den. I wasn't just walking back into a house. I was walking into a confrontation that would end our relationship forever. But Kat was right. The son I loved was already dead. The man on the porch was just a ghost who owed me a lot of money, and I was coming to collect. I walked back into the house with the digital affidavit loaded on my phone, ready for war. But as soon as I stepped into the living room, I realized the battlefield had changed. The stage had been reset. The glossy business binders were gone. The coffee table was cleared. Sitting on the white sofa was a man I had never seen before. He was wearing a suit that was a size too big, and his briefcase looked like it had been bought at a thrift store on the way over. Brandon jumped up as soon as I entered. He looked like he had been electrically shocked. "Dad, you are back," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "Come in, sit down. I want you to meet someone. This is Mr. Henderson. He is our corporate attorney. He came all the way from downtown to help us with the paperwork." Mr. Henderson stood up and extended a sweaty hand. His grip was limp. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Sullivan," he mumbled. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at the floor, then at Vanessa, then at his watch. I had worked with corporate attorneys for 40 years. They are sharks in $3,000 suits who smell like confidence and expensive cologne. This guy smelled like stale cigarettes and fear. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a prop. Probably a friend of a friend they paid $50 to wear a tie. I shook his hand, keeping my face blank. Nice to meet you, I said. I didn't know you had legal counsel on a Sunday morning. Vanessa walked in from the kitchen. She was wearing a sharp black dress trying to look professional, but her eyes were wild. We are on a tight schedule, Gerald, she said, skipping the pleasantries. Mr. Henderson has a flight to catch. We need to get this done now. She pointed to the armchair opposite the sofa. It was positioned perfectly with the coffee table blocking my path to the door. It was an interrogation setup. I sat down slowly, letting out a groan of old age that was only slightly exaggerated. So what is the rush? I asked, leaning back. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat nervously. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single document. It was the power of attorney form. Well, sir, given the volatility of the market and the, liquidity requirements of the merger, we need to expedite the asset verification. This document simply allows Brandon to represent your interests during the transition. It is standard boilerplate. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Brandon. He was wringing his hands, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked terrified. Not of me, but of the situation. He knew the clock was ticking. He knew the guys with the baseball bats were waiting. I reached for the paper, but I did not pick up the pen. I put on my reading glasses, taking my time to wipe the lenses with my shirt. I saw Vanessa's foot tapping a frantic rhythm on the hardwood floor. Tap, tap, tap. This seems very broad, I said, reading the first paragraph out loud. It says I grant full authority to sell, lease, or mortgage any real estate property. That does not sound like asset verification. That sounds like you are selling my house. It is just legal language, Dad, Brandon said, his voice cracking. We have to word it that way for the bank. We aren't actually going to sell it yet. We just need to show we have the option. Please, just sign it. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The desperation was pathetic. I do not know, I said, placing the paper back on the table. I think I should have my own lawyer look at this. I can scan it and send it to Kat in Chicago. She can review it by tomorrow. The room exploded. No, Vanessa screamed. She didn't just say it. She screamed it. The mask of the polite daughter-in-law shattered completely. She marched around the table and stood over me. We do not have until tomorrow. We do not have time for your lawyer friend to pick it apart. You need to sign this right now. Vanessa, honey, calm down. Brandon tried to intervene, but she spun on him. Shut up, Brandon, she hissed. You are too soft. Look at him. He is playing games with us. He has been stalling since he got here. She turned back to me, her face inches from mine. I could see the heavy foundation cracking around her eyes. I could smell the coffee on her breath. Listen to me, old man. We are not asking anymore. You are going to pick up that pen and you are going to sign your name. Or you are going to regret ever getting on that plane. I felt a spike of genuine fear. Not for my money, but for my safety. She was unhinged. She grabbed my wrist, her fingernails digging into my skin. She jammed the pen into my hand. Sign it, she commanded. I looked at the fake lawyer. He was pale, looking like he wanted to bolt for the door. He didn't sign up for assault. Mrs. Sullivan, maybe we should, he started. Sit down, she snapped at him without looking away from me. I looked at Brandon. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face. He made no move to stop her. He was broken. I realized then that I had no way out. If I refused, she might actually hurt me. Or worse, she might hold me hostage in this house until I complied. I needed to create chaos. I needed to break the room. I looked at the pitcher of ice water on the table. It was full. Condensation was dripping down the sides. I started to breathe heavily. I let my hand with the pen shake violently. I do not feel well, I stammered. My chest. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Stop acting, Gerald. It is pathetic. Sign the paper. I clutched my left arm, I let out a gasp that sounded like air escaping a tire. I squeezed my eyes shut and slumped forward. Dad Brandon yelled. I let my body go limp, sliding sideways in the chair. As I fell, I flailed my arm out, aiming perfectly for the pitcher. My hand struck the glass hard. The pitcher tipped. A gallon of ice water and cubes crashed onto the table. It washed over the power of attorney form like a tidal wave. The water soaked the paper instantly. The cheap inkjet ink they had used to print it began to bleed into a blue and black mess. The glass pitcher rolled off the table and shattered on the floor. Dad Brandon screamed, rushing to my side. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Dad, breathe. Oh my God! Vanessa, call 911. I kept my eyes closed, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. I heard the chaos erupt around me. My papers, Vanessa shrieked. Look at the papers. They are ruined. Screw the papers, Brandon roared. This was the first time I had heard him yell at her. He is having a heart attack. Help me get him to the floor. They dragged me out of the chair and laid me on the rug. I felt the cold water soaking into my shirt. I kept up the act, twitching my fingers, letting my jaw hang slack. I am getting out of here, I heard the fake lawyer say. I am not getting involved in a homicide investigation. Good luck, folks. I heard footsteps running to the front door, then the slam. The rat had fled the ship. Call an ambulance, Brandon was sobbing now, pressing his ear to my chest. No ambulance, Vanessa said, her voice cold and hard. If the paramedics come, they will see the mess. They will ask questions. He is faking it. Look at him. He did this on purpose to ruin the document. I am not calling an ambulance for a fake heart attack, she continued. Get him some water. Let him rest. If he is not dead in 10 minutes, we print another copy and we make him sign it while he is still on the floor. Her cruelty was breathtaking. Even in the face of death, she only saw a delay in her transaction. But she had made a mistake. She had underestimated my stamina. And she had underestimated the damage water does to cheap paper. I opened my eyes just a slit. Brandon was hovering over me, his face pale as a sheet. Water, I whispered. Just water. I got you, Dad, he said. He ran to the kitchen. I was left alone with Vanessa for 10 seconds. She stood over me, looking down with pure hatred. I know what you are doing, she whispered, and it won't work. You are not leaving this house until I get what I want, even if I have to guide your hand myself. Brandon came back with a glass. I took a sip, letting my hand shake so that half of it spilled on my chin. I need to lie down, I wheezed. My pills in my room. We will take you upstairs, Brandon said. He lifted me up. I leaned all my weight on him, making myself a dead weight. As we walked past the table, I looked at the soggy mess of pulp that used to be the power of attorney. It was destroyed. They would need to go buy more paper, find a printer, and draft it again. I had bought myself an hour, maybe 2. We got to the bedroom. Brandon laid me down on the bed. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I am so sorry. Go, I said weakly. Just let me sleep. He closed the door. As soon as the latch clicked, I sat up. The heart attack was over, but the adrenaline was still pumping. I checked my phone. I had recorded the last 10 minutes. I had the sound of Vanessa screaming, the sound of the struggle, and the sound of her refusing to call 911. I wasn't having a heart attack. I was executing a controlled demolition, and the first charge had just gone off. Now, while they were downstairs, arguing and trying to fix their printer, I had to prepare for the final act. I looked at the window. Dominic was watching. Kat was waiting. And I was ready to bring the roof down on their heads. As soon as the bedroom door clicked shut, the performance ended. I sat up in bed, shedding the persona of the frail, dying old man like a heavy coat. The chest pain vanished, replaced by a cold, adrenaline-fueled clarity. My heart was racing, not from cardiac arrest, but from the thrill of the hunt. I was behind enemy lines, and for the first time since I arrived in Los Angeles, the element of surprise was on my side. I listened to the house. Downstairs, I could hear the muffled sounds of chaos. Vanessa was screaming something about a paper jam. Brandon was shouting back, his voice cracking with stress. They were distracted. They were fighting a printer, that most stubborn of machines, and that gave me a window. A small one, perhaps 5 minutes, but enough for an engineer to do what needed to be done. I slipped off the bed, my socks silent on the plush carpet. I did not go to the door. I went to the adjoining wall. This guest room shared a wall with the study. I had seen Brandon running in and out of there all morning. I opened the door to the hallway a crack. The coast was clear. I slipped out, moving fast and low, and ducked into the study. The room smelled of stale energy drinks and desperation. And there, sitting on the glass desk like a holy grail, was Brandon's laptop. It was open. The screen was dark, having gone to sleep, but the power light was pulsing. I sat down in his leather chair, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. I tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life, blindingly bright in the dim room. A password prompt stared back at me. I cursed under my breath. Of course, but then I paused. I knew Brandon. I knew his habits. He was lazy with details. He used the same 4-digit PIN for everything since high school. But this was a text password. I thought about his ego. I thought about the fake persona he was trying to project. He worshipped tech billionaires. He wanted to be the next Elon Musk. I typed in the word Tesla. Incorrect. I tried Bitcoin. Incorrect. I took a breath, trying to think like a delusional narcissist. I typed in Ether King. The screen unlocked. I didn't have time to feel smug. I was staring at the desktop of a criminal. It was a mess of files, but one folder stood out. It was labeled simply Dad. I double-clicked it. The window opened, and the air left my lungs. It wasn't just loan applications. It was a full dossier on my life. There were scans of my passport, PDFs of my tax returns from 3 years ago. How did he get those? Then I remembered the time he asked to borrow my laptop to check his email during Christmas. He must have copied them then. He had been planning this for years. There were other files too. Photos of my signature cut and pasted from different documents, ready to be photoshopped onto contracts. A list of my passwords for Netflix and Amazon, which he had used to guess my banking security questions. It was a systematic deconstruction of my identity. I didn't read it all. If I read it, I would have broken down, and I didn't have time for grief. I pulled the USB drive Dominic had given me out of my pocket, but then I stopped. Too slow. The transfer would take minutes I didn't have. I opened a browser window. I logged into my encrypted email server. I dragged the entire Dad folder into a new email draft. I addressed it to Kat. I added a subject line that was just one word. Evidence. I hit send. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%. 50%. Downstairs, the shouting stopped. I heard the distinct mechanical whir of a printer starting up. They had fixed the jam. They would be coming back up any second. Come on, I whispered to the screen. 90% sent. I immediately went to the sent folder and permanently deleted the email. Then I went to the trash and emptied it. I minimized the browser. I left everything exactly as I had found it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Kat. I got it. This is a goldmine, Gerald. I am looking at the metadata. He created these fake IDs on this machine. We have him dead to rights. I typed back fast. What now? Her reply came instantly. The cavalry is coming. I called the LAPD fraud division. I sent them the preliminary evidence. They are dispatching a unit. And Gerald, I got a hold of the Airbnb host. Her name is Mrs. Higgins. She was not happy to hear her property is being used as a headquarters for identity theft. She is 5 minutes away. 5 minutes. I had to survive 5 minutes. I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. It was Brandon. He was moving fast, taking the steps 2 at a time. I jumped out of the chair. I smoothed the leather seat where I had been sitting, erasing the warmth of my body. I slipped out of the study and back into the guest room. I made it to the bed, just as the handle of the bedroom door began to turn. I dove under the covers, pulling them up to my chin. I scrunched my face into a mask of pain. I let my breathing become shallow and ragged. The door swung open. Brandon stood there holding a fresh, crisp stack of papers. The ink was still warm. He looked at me lying there in the dim light, and for a second I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He scanned the room. Had he heard something? Had he seen the shadow of movement under the door? He walked over to the bed. "Dad," he whispered. "Are you awake?" I let out a low groan, fluttering my eyes open. "Water," I rasped. He relaxed. The doubt vanished. I was still just the sick old man to him. "I got the papers, Dad," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of relief and urgency. "We just need to get this done. Then you can rest, I promise." He held the clipboard out to me. The pen was clicking in his other hand. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the door. I was counting the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I didn't need to sign. I didn't need to stall anymore. I just needed to wait for the doorbell. "Help me sit up," I said, my voice weak. He put his arm behind my back and hoisted me up. I leaned against him, feeling his heart pounding through his shirt. It was racing faster than mine. He was terrified. He knew he was on the edge of a cliff. He just didn't realize I was the one about to push him off. "Where do I sign?" I asked, taking the pen. My hand shook, but this time it wasn't acting. It was the anticipation of the kill. "Right here," he said, pointing to the line. I lowered the pen to the paper. I touched the tip to the page. I drew a small, shaky line. Then the sound came. It wasn't a doorbell. It was a fist pounding on the front door. Boom, boom, boom. Brandon froze. The pen slipped from his fingers. "Who is that?" he whispered. The pounding came again, louder this time. "Open up, police!" The color drained from my son's face so fast, it looked like his soul had left his body. He looked at me, eyes wide with horror. And in that moment I stopped shaking. I sat up straight. I dropped the act. I looked him dead in the eye and I smiled. "I think that is for you, son," I said. My voice was strong. My chest was clear. Brandon stumbled back, knocking over the nightstand lamp. You called them." I stood up, smoothing down my shirt. "I didn't call them, Brandon. Justice called them." Downstairs, the front door crashed open. Voices filled the foyer. Angry voices. Official voices. The sound of radio static. Brandon turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls of his fake empire were coming down, and I was standing in the center of the rubble watching him fall. The police were at the door, but the chaos outside had not yet breached the sanctuary of greed inside the living room. For a brief moment, time seemed to suspend. Brandon was staring at the front door, paralyzed by the shouting voices. I knew I had to act fast to steer this ship exactly where I wanted it to crash. I stood up and walked over to the window, peering out through the blinds. "It is not for you," I lied, my voice steady and reassuring. "It looks like they are raiding the house down the street. Probably a noise complaint or a drug bust. You know how this city is." Brandon slumped against the wall, the color slowly returning to his face. He let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Oh, God. I thought it was... Never mind. Just nerves." I turned to face them. The fear had loosened them up. They were raw, exposed, and desperate for a win. It was time to give them one. I walked over to the table where the fresh, unsigned power of attorney form lay waiting. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the paper. "I am ready to sign," I announced. The words hung in the air like a bell. Vanessa stopped pacing. Brandon straightened up. They looked at me with a hunger that was almost primal. "Really, Dad?" Brandon asked, taking a step forward. "You will do it?" "Yes," I said. "I have thought about it. You are right. I am too old to manage that big house in Chicago. And if this business of yours is truly the future, then I want to be part of it. I want to help my son build his empire." Vanessa let out a squeal of delight, clapping her hands together. "Finally. I told you he would come around, babe. I told you." But I added, raising a finger. "I have one condition." Vanessa's smile faltered. "What condition?" "I want a witness," I said. "A neutral third party. This is a significant legal transfer. I do not want any trouble with the IRS or the banks later. I want everything to be above board. I want you to call the neighbor." "Dominic." Brandon's face twisted in confusion. "The crazy guy with the hose. Why him?" "Because he is a homeowner," I explained calmly. "And he is right across the street. It makes it official. It shows we have nothing to hide. If we do this in secret, it looks suspicious. If we do it with a neighbor present, it looks like a family transaction." Vanessa exchanged a look with Brandon. They hated the idea, but they were so close to the finish line they could taste it. "Fine," Vanessa snapped. "Get the old lunatic over here. But if he starts raving about the CIA, I am kicking him out." Brandon grabbed his phone to text Dominic, but I stopped him. "I will wave him over," I said. I walked to the front door and opened it. Dominic was already standing on his porch, as if he had been waiting for a signal. I gave him a small nod. He started walking across the street, buttoning his blazer. He looked dignified, serious. A perfect witness for a funeral. While we waited for Dominic to cross the street, I decided to deploy the ultimate weapon. The bait that would make them lose their minds completely. "Oh, and Brandon," I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "While I was resting upstairs, I called the bank. I didn't want to wait for the house sale to clear. I know you said the deadline is noon, so I initiated an emergency wire transfer from my retirement savings." The room went dead silent. Brandon's eyes went wide. What he whispered. I tapped the screen and held it up for them to see. It was a screenshot of a banking confirmation page. I had mocked it up on my phone using a simple photo editor while I was hiding under the covers. It showed a transfer of $500,000 to an account ending in the digits of Brandon's shell company. Status: pending. $500,000! Brandon gasped, snatching the phone from my hand. He stared at the screen, his eyes scanning the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He looked like he was having a religious experience. "It should clear within the hour," I said. "I figured this would show the investors you are serious." Brandon screamed. It was a guttural, animalistic sound of pure triumph. He grabbed Vanessa and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around. "We did it. We freaking did it. We are rich, baby. We are back in the game." Vanessa was laughing, kissing him all over his face. "Oh my God, Gerald. Oh my God. You actually did it. They completely forgot I was standing there. They forgot the heart attack. They forgot the tension. All they saw was the money. And that is when the mask fell off completely. That is when they showed me who they really were." Brandon ran to the wet bar in the corner of the room. "We need champagne," he shouted. "Open the cristal, the one we were saving." He popped the cork, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Foam spilled over his hand, but he didn't care. He poured 3 glasses. He handed one to Vanessa and one to me. To Ether Dynamics, he toasted, raising his glass high. "To the moon." "To the moon," Vanessa screamed, clinking her glass against his so hard I thought it would shatter. I held my glass, but I did not drink. I just watched. "You know, Dad," Brandon said, wiping champagne from his lip, You really scared me for a minute there. I thought you were going to be a stubborn old mule until the bitter end. I am glad you finally saw reason. You do not need that money anyway. What are you going to spend it on? Bingo nights and compression socks. He laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. Vanessa chimed in, her voice shrill with adrenaline and greed. Seriously, Gerald, it is for your own good. You were rotting away in that house. It smelled like old people and dust. It was depressing. Now you have done something useful with your life. You have invested in the winners. She took a long sip of champagne, looking at me over the rim of the glass, with eyes that were cold and dead. And do not worry about where you are going to live, she continued, waving her hand dismissively. I made some calls this morning while you were groaning upstairs. I found a place I asked. My voice was quiet. I wanted them to keep talking. I wanted them to dig the hole so deep they could never climb out. Yeah, a facility, Brandon said, refilling his glass. It is in the valley. Sunshine Meadows or something. It is state-funded, so it won't cost us a dime. Vanessa giggled. It is a bit basic. You know, shared rooms, cafeteria food. But honestly, Gerald, at your age, you do not need luxury. You just need a bed, and someone to make sure you do not wander off. I felt a chill run down my spine. Sunshine Meadows. I knew that place. It had been on the news for neglect scandals, bed sores, malnutrition. That was where they were sending me. You are putting me in a state home, I said. After I just gave you $500,000. Brandon shrugged, grabbing a handful of nuts from a bowl. Look, Dad, we are going to be busy. I am going to be a CEO. Vanessa is going to be managing the brand. We cannot have you living here. It would cramp our style. Imagine us hosting a gala and you are shuffling around in your robe asking for tea. It is not the vibe. It is embarrassing, Vanessa added bluntly. Frankly, Gerald, you are an anchor. We are cutting the rope so we can sail. You should be grateful we are even finding you a place. We could just drop you at a shelter. She walked over to the mirror, admiring herself. She smoothed her dress, preening like a peacock. With this money, we can finally move out of this dump, she said, looking around the $4 million mansion with disdain. We can get a penthouse in Santa Monica. I want a view of the ocean, and I need a new car. The Porsche is a lease. I want a G-Wagon, matte black. Totally, Brandon agreed. And we need to upgrade our wardrobe. We have meetings next week. We need to look like money. Dad's money is going to buy us a whole new life. They were spending my retirement before it even hit their account. They were planning vacations, cars, jewelry. They were dividing up the carcass of my life like vultures at a feast. And the best part, Brandon said, turning to me with a smirk. The best part is that once you sign that power of attorney, we do not even have to ask you for permission anymore. If we need more cash, we just liquidate your portfolio. Boom. Done. You are basically our ATM now, Dad. He walked over and patted my cheek. It was a patronizing, disrespectful tap. Don't look so sad, old man. You are helping the economy. You are stimulating growth. You are finally useful. I stood there clutching the stem of the champagne glass so hard I thought it would snap. Useful. That was the word. I was an appliance to them, a resource to be mined and discarded. The doorbell rang. That must be the witness, Vanessa said, rolling her eyes. Ugh, let's get this over with quickly. I do not want that old freak smelling up the place. Brandon laughed. Yeah, let him sign, give him a bottle of water and kick him out. Then we can really celebrate. I am thinking caviar. I am thinking we book a private jet to Vegas for the weekend. I walked to the door. My hand hovered over the knob. Behind me, the celebration was in full swing. They were high on greed, drunk on the illusion of wealth. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped me of everything. I opened the door. Dominic stood there. He wasn't alone. Behind him, out of sight of the living room, stood Mrs. Higgins, the Airbnb host. She was a large woman with a face like thunder. And behind her, standing quietly on the porch, were two uniformed officers from the LAPD. I looked at Dominic. He gave me a wink. I turned back to my son and his wife. They were clinking glasses again, lost in their fantasy. "Brandon," I called out. My voice was different now. It was the voice of the man who used to inspect bridges for cracks. "The witness is here." Great Brandon shouted, not even looking up. "Bring him in, let's make history." He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea that the history we were about to make was his criminal record. I stepped aside. Dominic walked in. He stopped at the entrance of the living room and looked at the champagne, the spilled water, the celebration. "Nice party," Dominic said, his voice gravelly and hard. "Shame it is over." Brandon turned around, a smile still plastered on his face. "What did you say, old man?" Then Mrs. Higgins stepped into the room. The smile fell off Brandon's face. It didn't just fade. It vanished, replaced by a look of confusion that quickly morphed into terror. "Who the hell are you?" Vanessa demanded, stepping forward. "Get out of our house!" "Your house," Mrs. Higgins roared. Her voice shook the walls. "This is my house, and you are trespassing." And then the officers stepped in. The light from the open door caught their badges. The room went silent. The only sound was the fizzing of the champagne in the glasses. The celebration of greed was over. The reckoning had arrived. And I, the anchor, the burden, the ATM, stood silently by the door, watching the first brick of their empire turn to dust. The silence that followed the entry of the police officers was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating, the kind of silence that happens after a bomb detonates, but before the debris starts to fall. Vanessa dropped her champagne glass. It hit the white marble floor and shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot in a canyon. The expensive crystal exploded into 1,000 shards, and the golden liquid pooled around her designer heels, but she did not move. She did not look down. Her eyes were locked on the badges shining on the officers' chests. Brandon was frozen in mid-toast. His arm was still raised, holding his glass high, a grotesque statue of a celebration that had just been murdered. He looked at the officers, then at Mrs. Higgins, then at Dominic. His brain was misfiring, unable to process the sudden shift in reality. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, searching for the father who had always fixed his mistakes. But that father was not there anymore. "What is this?" Brandon stammered, his voice trembling. "Dad, tell them it is a mistake. Tell them we are celebrating a business deal." I did not answer him immediately. I slowly placed my own champagne glass on the table. I did it with deliberate care, ensuring it made no sound. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pen. The same pen Vanessa had forced into my hand moments ago. I held it up, inspecting it in the light, turning it over in my fingers. "Officers," I said, my voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the tension. "Please give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute." The lead officer, a tall man with a grim expression, nodded once. He sensed the gravity of the moment. He knew this was not just an arrest. It was a funeral for a family. I turned to Dominic. He was standing by the door, his arms crossed, his face set in a look of grim satisfaction. He was the witness I had asked for, but he was witnessing something far more tragic than a property transfer. He gave me a small, sad nod, acknowledging the pain I was about to endure. I walked over to Brandon. He took a step back, stumbling slightly. He looked small. Without his lies, without his borrowed mansion, and his fake confidence, he was just a frightened child in a grown man's suit. "Dad," he whispered, "what is happening? Why are they here?" I stopped 2 feet away from him. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. I looked deep into his eyes, trying to find the little boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. I tried to find the teenager who had promised to make me proud, but they were gone. All I saw was a stranger who viewed me as prey. I held up the pen. "You wanted me to sign, didn't you?" I asked softly. "You wanted me to sign away my life so you could keep living yours." Brandon licked his lips nervously. "Dad, the money. You transferred the money. We can fix this. We can pay them off. Just tell them to leave." I shook my head slowly. "There is no money, Brandon." The words hung in the air. Brandon blinked, confused. "What?" "There is no $500,000. I continued, keeping my voice level. "There is no transfer. That was a screenshot I made on my phone. Just like your business plan was a template you downloaded from the internet. Just like this house is a rental you are squatting in. Just like your life. It is all fake." Vanessa let out a gasp, a strangled sound of pure horror. "You lied to us," she screeched. "You old bastard, you lied to us." I ignored her. My focus was entirely on my son. "I know about the loans, Brandon. I know about the $150,000 you stole from me in 48 hours. I know about the mail theft. I know about the guys who visited you last night. I know everything." Brandon's knees gave way. He collapsed onto the white sofa, the champagne glass slipping from his fingers and rolling onto the rug. He looked up at me, his face crumbling. "I had to." "Dad," he sobbed. "I was in over my head. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was going to pay you back. I swear. Once the company took off, I was going to pay you back double." I looked down at him, and for the first time in my life, I felt no pity. I felt only a cold, hard resolve. "You were not going to pay me back," I said. "You were going to put me in a state home. I heard you. I heard you laughing about it. You were going to take the house I built with your mother, the money I saved for 30 years, and you were going to trade it all for a luxury car and a penthouse view." Brandon buried his face in his hands, weeping loudly. It was a pathetic sound. It was not the cry of remorse. It was the cry of a narcissist who had lost his audience. "But there is one thing I need to know," I said. "One thing I need to hear before they take you away." I leaned down, forcing him to look at me. I gripped his shoulder, my fingers digging into the fabric of his suit. "Why?" I asked. The single word echoed in the cavernous room. "Why did you do it, Brandon? I gave you everything. I paid for your college. I bought you your first car. I supported you when you failed. I never asked for anything in return. I just wanted you to be a good man. So why? Why did you decide that I was disposable? Why did you decide that my life was worth less than your comfort?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. The police officers shifted their weight, uncomfortable witnesses to this raw, bleeding wound of a conversation. Dominic looked down at the floor. Even Vanessa stopped her screeching, stunned into silence by the weight of the question. Brandon looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at me, and for a split second, the mask dropped completely. I saw the truth. I saw the resentment that had been festering in him for years. "Because it was easy," he whispered. The answer hit me like a physical blow. I recoiled, standing up straight. "Because you are old," Brandon continued, his voice gaining a sudden venomous strength. "Because you are just sitting there in that big house waiting to die. You do not need the money. You do not use it. You just hoard it. And I am out here struggling. I am out here trying to be someone. It wasn't fair. You had everything and you were just letting it rot. I deserved it more than you." He spat the words out, projecting all his failures onto me. In his twisted mind, he was the victim. He was Robin Hood, stealing from the rich father to feed his own starving ego. "I deserved it," he repeated, his voice rising to a shout. "I am your son. You owe me." I stared at him. The final puzzle piece clicked into place. He didn't love me. He didn't even hate me. He simply felt entitled to consume me. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, a savings account with a pulse. I nodded slowly. The grief in my chest began to recede, replaced by the steel of acceptance. I see, I said quietly. You think I owe you because I am your father. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out the USB drive Dominic had given me. I held it up so he could see it. Well, son, I said, my voice hardening into stone. Today I am paying my debts, but not with money. I turned to the lead officer and held out the drive. Officer, I said clearly, this drive contains video evidence of mail theft, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. My attorney has already filed the affidavits. I am pressing full charges. Brandon's eyes bulged. No, he screamed. Dad, no. You can't. I am your son. I looked back at him one last time. The connection was severed. The bridge had collapsed. I have no son in this room, I said. My son died the moment he decided I was just a paycheck. You are just a thief who broke into the wrong house. Officer, I said, turning my back on him. Please remove these trespassers. The spell broke. The room exploded into motion. The officers moved in handcuffs, jingling on their belts. Vanessa screamed as an officer grabbed her arm. Brandon scrambled back over the sofa trying to run, but he was cornered. I walked over to Dominic. I stood next to him, watching the destruction of my family. I did not look away. I watched as they cuffed Brandon. I watched as they read him his rights. I watched as he screamed my name, begging, pleading, cursing. I stood tall. I stood silent. I had asked my question. I had received my answer. And now I was delivering the consequence. The storm had finally broken, and while it was destroying everything in its path for the first time in days, I could finally breathe. I did not scream. I did not throw a punch. I simply took my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the glass coffee table right next to the puddle of spilled champagne. The screen was glowing a call already connected. I pressed the speaker button. The room fell into a hush so deep I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Catherine, I said, my voice steady. You are on speaker. Everyone is listening. The voice that filled the room was not the warm voice of the little girl I used to push on the swings. It was the voice of a prosecutor. It was cold, sharp, and terrifyingly precise. This is Catherine O'Malley, attorney at law representing Gerald Sullivan. I am speaking to Officer Miller of the LAPD Fraud Division. The lead officer stepped forward, nodding at the phone. Go ahead, counselor. I have just successfully filed an emergency injunction with the Superior Court of Los Angeles, Kat announced. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings, sounding like the voice of God delivering a commandment. As of 2 minutes ago, all assets associated with Brandon Sullivan, Vanessa Sullivan, and their shell entity, Ether Dynamics, have been frozen. Brandon let out a strangled noise like a man who had been punched in the gut. Frozen, he whispered. But the transfer. The 500,000. There is no 500,000, Brandon Cat continued, answering him directly. And there never will be. But there is a warrant. I have forwarded the digital evidence of 18 counts of wire fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft to the district attorney. The bail has been set, recommendation at $1 million. You are not going to Vegas, Brandon. You are going to county jail. Vanessa screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that shattered the last remnants of their composure. She lunged at the phone, her manicured claws extended as if destroying the device would stop the truth from coming out. You witch, she shrieked. You ruined us! An officer stepped in, grabbing Vanessa by the wrist before she could reach the table. She thrashed against him, her designer dress twisting her hair, falling across her face in wild strands. Get off me, she yelled. Do you know who I am? I am a victim here. He made me do it. She pointed a shaking finger at Brandon. The united front, the lovey-dovey couple who were going to conquer the world together, dissolved in an instant. He made me, she sobbed, tears streaking her heavy makeup. He told me his father was senile. He told me the money was just sitting there. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to help. Brandon looked at her, his jaw dropping. "Vanessa, what are you doing?" he stammered. "We are in this together." "Not anymore, loser," she spat back. "I am not going to prison for your failed startup." "Officer, I want to make a statement. I want a deal. I can tell you where he hid the other credit cards." I watched them turn on each other. It was pathetic. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. But the humiliation was not over. From the hallway, a booming voice cut through Vanessa's sobbing. "You can make a statement after you pay for my floors." Mrs. Higgins, the real owner of the house, stormed into the living room. She was a force of nature. She was wearing a floral dress, but she walked like a general. She pushed past the police officers, ignoring their requests to stay back, and marched right up to Brandon. She looked at the champagne on the rug. She looked at the water on the table. She looked at the hole in the wall that Brandon had punched the night before. "You animals," she shouted, shaking her purse at him. "I rent this place to you for 3 days. 3 days. And look at it. You turned my beautiful home into a crime scene." She turned to the police. "Officer, add vandalism to the charges. And trespassing." Their booking ended at 11 a.m. It is now 11:15. They are squatters. Get them out of my house. Brandon shrank back into the sofa cushions. He looked tiny. The crushing weight of reality was hitting him from all sides. The legal system was coming for his freedom. The landlord was coming for his dignity. And his father was standing there watching it all happen with dry eyes. He looked at me one last time. It wasn't a look of anger anymore. It was a look of pure, unadulterated panic. "Dad, please," he begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "Make them stop. I am sorry. I will go to rehab. I will get a job. I will do anything. Just do not let them take me." I looked at him. I remembered the day he was born. I remembered holding him and promising to protect him from the world. But I realized now that the only way to protect him was to let the world teach him the lesson I never could. "I cannot stop this, Brandon," I said softly. "You started a fire. Now you have to burn." The lead officer nodded to his partner. "All right, that is enough. Let's go." They pulled Brandon up from the sofa. He went limp, his legs refusing to work. They had to drag him his expensive Italian shoes, dragging across the floor he had pretended to own. Vanessa was already in cuffs, being led out the door. She was still screaming, cursing Brandon, cursing me, cursing the world. She kicked over a vase as she passed a final act of petty destruction. Mrs. Higgins was following them out, listing the damages to a bewildered junior officer. And then the room was empty. Just me, Dominic, and the silence. I looked at the phone still sitting on the table. Kat was still on the line. I could hear her breathing. "Is it done?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. "It is done." I walked over and picked up the phone. I looked around the room. It was a wreckage of broken glass, spilled liquids, and shattered dreams. But for the first time since I arrived in Los Angeles, the air felt clean. The toxic lie had been sucked out of the room, leaving only the hard, cold truth. I hung up the phone. I turned to Dominic. "Thank you," I said. Dominic shrugged, but his eyes were kind. He walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Do not thank me yet, Gerald. You still have to pack, and I think you owe me a beer." I managed a small smile. The first real smile in days. "2 beers," I said, "and maybe a pizza. But not from that place with the flyers." We walked out of the house together, leaving the door wide open. I didn't care who went in there. I didn't care about the furniture or the view. I walked down the driveway, past the rusted gate, past the dead grass. I didn't look back at the mansion. I looked across the street at the messy, cluttered, honest house of the man who had saved my life. I was homeless in Los Angeles. My son was in jail. My heart was broken. But as I stepped onto the pavement, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free. And that was worth more than $500,000. That was worth everything. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is distinct. It is a series of sharp mechanical clicks that signify the end of freedom. I stood in the center of the living room and listened to that sound. Click, click, click. It was the sound of my son's life falling apart. Brandon did not fight. He did not run. When the metal touched his skin, his legs simply gave out. The officers had to hold him up, hooking their arms under his armpits like they were supporting a drunk. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving in short, shallow gasps, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that did not exist. Vanessa was less resigned. As the female officer spun her around and secured her wrists, she let out a stream of obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. She wasn't crying for forgiveness. She was screaming about lawsuits. She was threatening the officers with the names of lawyers she definitely could not afford. "Take your hands off me," she shrieked, kicking at the officer's shins. "Do you know who I am? You are making a huge mistake." They marched her out first. I watched her go. The woman who had sneered at my clothes, who had called me an anchor, who had planned to dump me in a state facility, was now being shoved into the back of a patrol car. She didn't look back at Brandon. Not once. Their partnership, built on greed and mutual delusion, had evaporated the moment the consequences arrived. Then it was just Brandon. The officers began to walk him toward the door. He dug his heels into the expensive rug, fighting for one last second of time. He looked at me, his face wet with tears and snot, a mask of pure terror. "Dad, wait," he choked out. The officers paused, giving us a moment. Brandon looked at me with a desperate, frantic hope. The house. The house in Chicago. "Sell it. Please. You can use the equity for bail. You can hire a defense team. I will pay you back. I swear to God, Dad, I will work the rest of my life to pay you back. Just do not let them take me." He was still doing it. Even in handcuffs, he was still trying to spend my money. He still thought the solution to his moral bankruptcy was a financial transaction. I walked closer to him. I wanted him to see me clearly. I wanted him to see the man he had underestimated. "There is no house, Brandon," I said. He blinked, confusion cutting through his panic. "What do you mean?" "Of course there is. The Colonial." "I sold it," I said. My voice was calm, but it felt like gravel in my throat. "I sold it 6 months ago." Brandon froze. You sold it." "Yes," I continued. "I sold it to a young couple, a teacher and a firefighter. They have a baby on the way. They reminded me of us 30 years ago. They are living there now. They are painting the nursery. That house isn't mine anymore." "But—" "The money," Brandon stammered. "The proceeds. You have the money." I shook my head. "I didn't keep the money, son. I put it all into a trust. An irrevocable charitable trust. Do you know what irrevocable means? It means I cannot touch it. It means you cannot touch it. It means no judge in this country can touch it." Brandon's mouth hung open. "Where is it?" he whispered. "It is with St. Jude's Hospital," I said. "It is funding cancer research for children. I set it up thinking that one day, if you settled down, if you had kids, I might be able to divert some of the interest to help you. But I saw who you became, so I locked it down. Every penny." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He slumped in the officer's grip. The safety net he thought was there. The golden parachute he had been counting on to save him from his own wreckage was gone. He was falling, and there was nothing beneath him but the hard, cold ground. "You have nothing," he whispered. "You came here with nothing." I stepped right up to him. I looked into his eyes, which were so like his mother's, yet so completely empty of her warmth. "You are wrong," I said. "I came here with everything. I came here with my love for you. I came here with my integrity. I came here ready to forgive you for missing birthdays, for forgetting holidays. I came here hoping to find my son." I pointed a finger at his chest. "But you," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep from shouting. "You broke into the wrong vault. You spent 3 days trying to crack a safe that was already open. You thought the treasure was in my bank account. You thought the value of a father was in his assets." I took a breath, delivering the final verdict on his life. "You stole an empty wallet, Brandon. You stole an empty wallet because you threw away the real treasure, which is family. You traded a father who would have died for you for a lifestyle that will not even remember your name." Brandon let out a sob that sounded like something breaking. He lowered his head, unable to look at me. The fight was gone. The hope was gone. "Officer," I said, stepping back, "he is all yours." "Dad," Brandon wailed as they dragged him out the door. "Dad, I am sorry. I am sorry." I watched him go. I watched the door close on my son. I listened to the siren wail as the car pulled away, taking the last remnants of my family with it. I stood alone in the foyer of a rented mansion, surrounded by fake art and real silence. My wallet was in my pocket. It was light. It had no cash, no black cards. But as I touched it, I felt a strange sense of fullness. I had lost my son, but I had kept myself. And in a world of counterfeits, that was the only fortune worth keeping. The sun was beginning to set over the hills of Bel Air, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. I sat on the front porch of Dominic's house holding a cold bottle of beer. The condensation dripped onto my hand, a stark contrast to the dry, frantic heat of the last 24 hours. Across the street, the massive iron gates of the rental mansion were closed. The police cars were gone. The shouting was over. It was just a house again, a silent, empty box that had held a nightmare. Dominic sat in the rocking chair next to me. He took a long pull from his beer and let out a satisfied sigh. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not ask for details. He just sat there, offering the silent companionship that only men of a certain age truly understand. "You did good," Gerald Dominic said, finally breaking the silence. Most people would have folded. Most people would have signed the paper just to make the screaming stop. "You held the line." I took a sip of the beer. It tasted bitter and clean. I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a survivor of a natural disaster. I had lost my house, my son, and my illusions. But strangely, I did not feel empty. I felt lighter. I kept waiting for the guilt to hit me, I admitted, looking at the dark windows of the house across the street. I kept waiting to feel bad about sending my own boy to jail. But all I feel is relief. Is that wrong? Dominic shook his head. "No. It is necessary. You didn't send your boy to jail. You sent a criminal to jail. The boy you raised died a long time ago. You just finally attended the funeral." He was right. The grief I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a clarity that was almost sharp. I had spent so many years worrying about Brandon, worrying about his grades, his career, his happiness. I had made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I had saved every penny, denied myself vacations, and worn old suits just so I could leave him a legacy. And he had tried to steal it before I was even cold in the ground. I finished the beer and set the bottle down on the porch railing. I stood up and stretched. My back cracked. It was the sound of tension leaving my body. "Where to now?" Dominic asked. "Back to Chicago." I laughed. "No, Chicago is cold. And I sold my house, remember? I have nowhere to be. And for the first time in 40 years, I have no one to take care of." I pulled my phone out and opened the airline app. I had booked a ticket while waiting for the police to finish their report. It was a one-way ticket. Hawaii, I said. Kauai specifically. I have a friend who runs a small hotel near the beach. He has been asking me to visit for a decade. I always told him I couldn't afford the time. I always told him I had to save for Brandon's future. I looked at Dominic and smiled. Well, Brandon's future is now in the hands of the state of California, so my time is my own. Dominic stood up and shook my hand. It was a strong grip. Enjoy the waves, Gerald. You earned them. And if you ever come back to this crazy city, you know where I live. Just do not bring any more drama. I am retired. I walked down the driveway with my suitcase. I did not look back at the rental house. It was just a backdrop now, a set piece in a play that had closed early. An Uber was waiting for me at the curb. I lifted my bag into the trunk. It felt lighter than when I arrived, maybe because I wasn't carrying the weight of a lie anymore. The ride to the airport was smooth. I rolled the window down and let the Los Angeles air rush over my face. It smelled of exhaust and ocean salt. I watched the palm trees blur past. Yesterday, they looked like bars on a cage. Today, they looked like victory flags. When I got to the airport, I did not go to the economy line. I walked straight to the first-class counter. I handed the agent my passport. She smiled. Heading home, sir, she asked. I looked at the ticket. Seat 1A, Ocean View. No, I said. I am heading away from home. I am starting over. I boarded the plane and settled into the wide leather seat. A flight attendant came by with a tray. Champagne, sir. I looked at the glass. It bubbled in the light. I thought about the cheap champagne Brandon had poured to celebrate his theft. I thought about the toast to his fake empire. I reached out and took the glass. Yes, thank you, I said. I raised the glass to the window, to the sprawling city below, to the sun I had lost and the life I had found. To the truth, I whispered. I took a sip. It was cold. It was real. And it tasted like freedom. As the plane lifted off, roaring over the Pacific Ocean, I closed my eyes. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I would ever talk to Brandon again. But I knew one thing. I was 67 years old, and my life was not over. It was just beginning. I had cut the anchor, and now finally I was sailing. This has been the story of how I lost a son but found myself. If you are listening to this and you are holding on to someone who hurts you just because they are family, let go. Blood is not a contract for abuse. You are worth more than what you can give. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more stories about justice and truth. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have signed the paper? I will see you in the comments. Aloha.